Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast on true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and the macabre. And your hosts are me, Bob Dale.
And me, Nadine Royal. We're a couple of friends who met in the pub and developed a friendship based on our mutual love of booze, podcasts and pub quizzes. We met in the Settle Inn in Stirling, and that's where we record.
Each week we'll both tell a story of something twisted. One long one and one short one. And we'll decide who goes first.
Based on the flip of a coin. And yes, we do record our intro live every week.
Do you know, we've said this to each other a million times now. We should know that off by heart.
We do, though.
I think we think it over too much.
Yeah, the minute I open my mouth, I'm like, what's the next word? What's the next line? What's the next bit? What's going to happen? And then I'm just like, oh, I've already said it. It's done.
Anyway, that's our mild moan out the way at the beginning there.
How are you?
I'm good. You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. I've got a tiny, tiny kitten in my flat currently.
Well, I saw a picture of you having it in your pocket, so as long as it's not here.
She's so sweet. Yeah, I brought her home today. I'm her foster mum for this week. She's doing so well. That's her 2 weeks almost since her operation at work. So brought my work home with me, which isn't always a bad thing.
Well, no, not if it's a cat. I was away in the Yorkshire Dales this weekend.
So you were. How was it?
They're like, Rosalind makes this joke every time we drive down there and we pass the brown side that's the Yorkshire Dales.
Is it
and
Dale,
like,
the Dales and Dale?
Oh, she's like, oh, look, it's our English Yorkshire family. And I'm like, no, that wasn't funny the first time.
I think it's funny.
But yeah, I do giggle anyway. It's fine. No, we had a great time. Took the wee man out on a waterfall trail and then we took him up to see some caves and climbing and stuff. Turns out he's a lot heavier to carry now than he used to be, and my legs were fairly done on Monday. But yeah, first outing out with a tent this year, so it was good fun.
Nice. I like how you're saying after this weekend that your legs are done, but when you came back from Everest Base Camp, you didn't say that.
So I think the difference being, now I was thinking about this because it was ridiculous. I did what? Well, I told you it was something like 370,000 steps in 11 days going to base camp, round trip. And then we did probably 12 miles over 2 days. But he's heavier than the stuff I was carrying. I couldn't hire a Sherpa to carry him for me.
Yeah, fair.
And he moves.
Yeah,
like he moves in the carrier.
Thing,
so like I'm moving about trying to compensate for that. And anyway, first of all, problems, innit? Never mind. But I did spend some time while I was away doing my research.
Lovely. How did you find it?
There's actually nothing better than sitting in a tent by a campfire reading about murder.
Lovely.
Which is my chosen pastime these days. But it was much better having a campfire to do it around.
Nice.
Mine is obviously part 2 of my mini-series this week.
Yes, it is indeed.
So I have short stories, so I had to have a look through them and decide which one would be the most suited to a shorter story.
Mm-hmm. As promised, I've not looked at any of them.
Good. But I will introduce you to our story, my story in a second.
Nice.
And how about you? How'd you go?
Yeah, no, it's been all right. I took slight inspiration from your stories, your mini-series, and also this is a story that was recommended to me by JJ, my boyfriend.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he was like, oh, you should look into this.
Ooh.
And
are we using official terms now, are
yeah.
we? Oh, no. Okay, here we are.
Yeah, I looked into it, and it was very interesting.
Oh,
it was
cool.
something that I didn't know about, but the instant, I think you'll have heard of it, the instant I told my mum what I was doing this week, she was like, oh yeah, like blah, 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 and like knew all about it. So I think a lot of people, especially Scottish/British people, will know all about it.
Cool. What was the caveat with mine I was going to tell you about? This is another one that I've read that is the most sensational case of Scottish history. But I'm sure I've read that in 90% of the Scottish cases I've covered. So I haven't deliberately said this was the most sensational. However, it's quite something.
I know. I think there's been a couple of my stories where I've said something of the ilk of like, oh, this was the biggest murder of the time and stuff, and now I think I've learned that that's probably just a bit of hyperbole.
Yeah, and actually after my human crocodile one last episode, I will not ever use the words, this was the biggest crowd that ever turned out for a public hanging, because 100,000, I don't think we're going to top that unless it's something special.
Yeah.
I did come across another Scottish podcast today. Came across it today because, as I've said before, I like to do my reading and read about it. But then I listen to other people's podcasts on it, and all I do is I Google the the topic or the person involved in it and just put podcast after it in hyphens.
Good idea.
Just to have it, see if I can find anything. Occasionally we get the same kind of hits every now and again from other true crime podcasts in the UK, which we are massive fans of all of. Mm-hmm. But this one I hadn't heard of, and it's Weirder Hings.
Hings.
Weirder
Hings.
Weirder Hings.
Excellent.
Couple of guys from Glasgow that are doing, and it's not just true crime.
Okay, cool.
So they just do weird stuff from Scotland.
Well, we all know I can get behind that.
So I think we should reach out to them and see if we can do a promo swap with them.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we'll tag them some stuff this week and get on it, because actually they're really good. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. I'll look into them.
Anyway, that was just my wee. I thought I'll do it now.
Yeah, get out of the way.
Because I'll forget otherwise. Anyway, enough waffling.
Flip it.
Are we going yak or mountain?
I'm gonna say yak. You go first.
And yak it is.
Let's go.
I am on short story this week, as I said before, and this is part 2 of my Glasgow miniseries.
Nice.
So, like I said to you last time, what I wish I'd done was have a look at I wish I'd found the square mile of murder before I found the individual case.
Right.
Because if I had done, what I would have done was rejig it and try and do it in timeline order. Mm-hmm. Although they are linked geographically, but not by anything else, I thought, timeline order kind of makes sense. So what I've gone back to the first one.
Okay.
And this is, tonight I'm going to look at the story of Madeleine Smith.
Okay.
And the murder of Pierre-Emile Longlea.
Doesn't sound very British.
He wasn't. But this happened in Glasgow, so that's fine. And it happened in the year 1857. So Madeleine Smith was born on the 29th of March in 1835 into a very reasonably well-off family in Glasgow. Her father, James, was a prominent Glasgow architect, and her mother, Elizabeth, was the daughter of a very famous architect for the time. So the reason that they were well off was because of the architecture that came from both family stems?
Yeah.
Family branches?
Yep.
Yeah. They lived in a very beautiful townhouse on Blythswood Square.
Lovely. Actually, here we go. When I told JJ what you were doing for your mini-series, he very, very quickly said, I bet one of them at least happened in Blythswood.
So this is the famous one from Blythswood Square.
Nice.
So if you know Glasgow at all, you'll know where Blythswood Square is. Mm-hmm. It's actually not far off the Sucky Hall Street that we mentioned last week. But this house is on the corner of West Regent Street side of Blythswood Square. Blythswood Square is famous for a few other reasons now. I think ladies of the night might frequent the area, but wouldn't have been in the 1800s. Well, might have been in the 1800s.
That's why JJ called it, was that it was the original prostitute area.
I know it is now.
I think maybe it's just never changed.
Maybe it's always been that, yeah, but I would be surprised if it was during the 1850s, actually, because they were quite a well-off, prominent family.
Yeah.
And actually, if you go to the corner of West Regent Street, and it's Blythswood Street, West Regent Street, and Blythswood Square, there's a plaque on the wall that says Madeleine Smith's house.
Oh.
You can see it, and it's at eye level as you walk past. It's really cool. If you go on Google Maps, you can actually see the plaque on Google Maps. The family owned the townhouse there, but they also owned a country retreat near Rue on the River Clyde.
Hey, that's my neck of the woods.
Which is not very far from your hometown, is it?
It's like 10 minutes up the road, if even that. Not even 5 minutes
I remember
up the road.
messaging you last year. I was working down there, and I was look where I am.
Yeah, it's right up the road.
So they lived in they had a country retreat in Rue, and Rue's a beautiful part of the world.
Rue is very lovely.
Ruined now by the naval base up the road, but anyway, we don't do politics. So at 16 years old, Madeleine had I think it's Madeleine, actually, sorry.
Spell?
Madeleine.
I'd say Madeleine.
Okay.
I think that's Madeleine.
So she'd had a normal schooling up to the age of about 16, where she was sent to London for a couple of years, where she was sent to a school for proper women. And I looked up the school's name. One of the sources I had the school's name on it, but I looked it up, but I couldn't find any reference to it actually being there, but there is a record of her going to London to go to school. And she went to learn to be a proper young woman. She would learn manners, piano, dance, and how to act as a proper woman in society.
Very nice.
So I've enrolled you.
I always imagine... yeah, I do need those lessons. So I keep getting caught drinking and smoking in public. Mm-hmm. Which we all know is a terrible thing.
It's a crime.
I just imagine all these girls now with like books on their heads walking in straight lines.
I bet it was something like that, yeah.
You know, and elocution lessons.
And then also elocution lessons and how to hold your drink properly.
Yes, and like which forks for the shrimp.
I can never say elocution properly, which I find ironic considering what it is.
Yes.
But never mind. So she spent 2 years there between 1851 and 1853, and she returned to Glasgow when she was 18 years old. Having been back in Glasgow for a couple of years, Madeleine met and struck up a relationship with Pierre. Pierre-Emile Longueur was born to French parents in the Channel Islands. He was born in 1823 and grew up and worked in the family's seed and plant business. They were French-speaking parents that didn't speak any English at all. And as such, when they wanted to try and expand the business to incorporate wealthy English speakers that were coming to the Channel Islands, we decided the best way to do that would be to send Pierre off to work as an apprentice at another firm where he would learn English. The firm he went to had dealings with lots of English speakers, and it didn't take him very long to become fluent in English, or as fluent as he needed to be to work in a seed and plant industry.
Yeah.
But actually he did really well and was approached by a Scottish landowner to come and work up in Scotland on his estate. So he moved to Edinburgh, and he worked in Edinburgh for a while for the landowner before he moved to Glasgow to work in a warehouse. Now, I don't know why the stark difference in working in this, with plants and seeds and stuff like that, and then moving to a warehouse.
Yeah.
But for some reason, he moved to Glasgow and ended up working in a warehouse. For those of you who may have just heard, the Pub Domino's team seem to have just won the league.
Well, we've won the league. I was going to leave it until you finished talking, and I was going to say...
No, I can't not look at them all now.
I was going to say, like... As well, ironically, actually, I was going to wait until you finish your story and then point out to our listeners that, you know, the one thing with us recording in the pub is quite often hard to not be distracted by goings on around you, but... when a character such as the bold Malks rocks up with a trophy hoisted above his head with triumphant glee on his face because the Settling Domino's team has won the Domino's League of Stirling, you can't help but stop, I suppose.
So if you are listening to us, comment on the Settling's Facebook page saying congratulations to them. So sorry, just to give a brief recap.
Yeah.
Madeleine had grown up in Glasgow all her life, gone off to London, come back, having spent a couple of years doing manners and all sorts. She'd met a guy, Pierre-Emile Longueur, who had ended up in Edinburgh because he'd been approached by a landowner to work up there. His family were seed and plants. Mm-hmm. He moves to Glasgow to work in a warehouse, and I think he was he was like a warehouse, not manager, but he wasn't just a...
Like a workie.
Yeah, he wasn't a workie on the line. Mm-hmm. You know. So the two of them were first introduced by a mutual friend around 1855, and it's not sure how they came to see each other in the first place, but from what I could gather, Pierre had seen her somewhere and gone, quite like you, mm-hmm. and realised that they had a mutual friend and said to the mutual friend, can you introduce the two of us? Which she did. The mutual friend introduced the two of them, and Madeleine fell for Pierre pretty, like, head over heels fell for him. You know, beautiful, well-spoken Frenchman.
Well, yeah, he's not going to love that.
Yeah.
And he knows about plants and seeds.
And he knows about plants and seeds. I think I quite fancy him, to be honest.
I think I might.
Big problem being, he works in a warehouse, and she's from high society.
Yeah, it's not exactly a good fit, is it?
So it doesn't work very well that way.
If he owned the warehouse, though.
Would have been much better. So, Madeleine knew she wouldn't be an acceptable partner. He wouldn't be an acceptable partner in her father's eyes, so they kept their relationship secret, and they struck up this kind of quiet affair that nobody knew about.
Because that always goes so well.
So what they did was they wrote letters to each other a lot, which is supposed to be their version of texting.
Yep.
So they wrote hundreds of letters to each other, and they met outside of her or his home so that they wouldn't be tied to somewhere. Mm-hmm. They sometimes met in shops in the local area, and the agreement would be that they wouldn't tell anybody, and they would destroy the letters from each other. So that basically so no one would find out about them.
Yeah.
Somehow, however, Madeleine's father did find out about the two of them, and he demanded that their relationship ended. Although she was clearly in love with Pierre, she wrote to him and said that they had to end the relationship because she couldn't carry it on.
Right.
Pierre wasn't overly keen about this, so he didn't let it lie at all. And he wrote back to her and managed to convince her that they should keep meeting with them, but at a friend's house only.
Right.
So we don't tie it to at a place, just this friend's house that nobody knows about. Let's go meet there. She agreed, and after a while, the two of them were madly in love at this point, and they really struck up this relationship, and everything built to the point where actually they got engaged on the quiet. During this time, however, Madeleine's parents thought she was a single woman and started looking for a suitable man for her.
Oh dear.
They introduced her to William Minnick, who was a wealthy merchant who was also known to the family. I think his family lived on Blythe Square as well, and was quite a well-respected family within the Glasgow area. They then spent the September of 1856 together in the house in Rue. Her and William
I forgot
did.
about Rue. Lovely. Out on the marina.
And maybe not by then.
Suppose not, but, lovely.
There'd have been
down by the beach.
Yeah, there'd have been a yard there, probably. Anyway. So Madeleine came to the conclusion eventually that her parents were actually right, and that William would be able to provide her with a life that she was more suited to. He would be able to provide her with the kind of things that she was used to, and actually that Pierre was a love interest and not a life partner. So she made this decision, and in the spring of 1857, William and Madeleine became engaged. At this point, she's engaged to two men.
Poor Pierre.
Poor Pierre. She wrote to Pierre to say that she was calling off the engagement and that he should make sure that all the letters were returned or destroyed or returned to her via her maid. He had already found out about the engagement to William and had decided that he wouldn't comply with her requests and would instead show the letters to her father.
Oh, shit. This is not going to go down well.
She wrote again asking him not to and to meet with her. He did meet with her again and managed to convince her to keep meeting with him. However, during their next few meetings, Pierre started to find himself very ill afterwards.
Oh dear. Is this another poison story?
Look, I didn't... These stories chose me, not...
Milk, bread, eggs.
Yeah, milk, bread, and
Get
eggs.
it down, you.
It's around this time that you can find records that show Madeleine was buying arsenic from a druggist in Glasgow.
A druggist?
Apothecary?
Oh. I was...
Chemist shop. We both really went for that
We
there.
did. Apothecary.
Yes, there you go. Good Harry Potter knowledge.
Nadine's word of the week.
Not Bob's. It was, however, still registered as a poison then. So the reason that she gave to the druggist for buying it was she had to get rid of rats. And she had to sign a dangerous substances log.
That's very responsible.
To buy it from them.
Well, a very responsible chemist.
Early in the morning, on the 23rd of March, Pierre was discovered by his landlady dead in his bed. He was determined to have died from arsenic poisoning.
Madeleine, you're so stupid.
On inspection of his lodgings, the letters from Madeleine were found, and that, along with reports of her buying the arsenic, Madeleine was arrested and tried with murder.
Fair. I mean, it doesn't take... I was going to say Shakespeare. What was I going for? Sherlock.
Doesn't take Sherlock.
Doesn't take Sherlock to work this one out, I don't think.
So during the trial, the letters were read out in the court.
Excellent.
And the facts of buying the arsenic
What did they say? Dear Pierre, I am poisoning you.
No, well, they read all the love letters out to
Yeah, I
show
know.
the relationship. Sorry,
This is so stupid.
and the facts were presented that she'd been buying arsenic from this druggist. However, during the trial, she defended it as buying the arsenic for cosmetic purposes.
Cosmetic?
Yeah, well, they used to use it for like a skin whitening.
Oh my god.
she'd
just rub some arsenic on you.
Well, she just claimed she was rubbing it on her arms and her face and everything to kind of for skin treatments and all that kind of stuff. Saying that she'd been too embarrassed to admit that had been the reason at the time, so she'd said rat poison. All of the evidence presented in the trial, however, was seen as circumstantial. Although there was motive, because she wanted rid of him, and she had the means, she had the arsenic, and there was proof of a relationship there. The jury deliberated and came back with a verdict that is only available in the Scottish court systems.
Ooh.
Not proven.
Oh, I like this. Okay.
So basically, this means the jury didn't believe she was innocent, but they didn't believe
Sufficient
the
evidence.
prosecution had proven guilt.
Nice.
So they believed she'd done it,
Yeah,
but
but
they couldn't prove that she'd done it.
I didn't know that was just a Scottish courts thing.
So not proven is a verdict only available in a court in Scotland.
That's very cool.
Under Scots law, a criminal trial can end in one of three verdicts. One of conviction, guilty, and two of acquittal, not proven and not guilty.
Okay.
It's known in other British courts as the Scottish verdict,
Oh, nice. Okay.
and it's known in Scotland colloquially as the bastard's verdict, being that we know that bastard did it,
Yeah, you
but we can't prove it.
absolute bastard.
So she was set free.
That's mad.
There was a bit of a
that's
media
so-
storm that followed the case, obviously. Well-to-do woman poisons her husband. We're pretty sure she did it, but we can't prove it.
Fiancé only.
Fiancé, sorry. Obviously, at this point, the wonderful William had left her. Mm-hmm. So she was left as a double non-engagee. And decided that after all this had kicked off, she'd leave Scotland.
Yeah. Okay.
She moved to London, where she married a man by the name of George Wardle and had 2 children with him. They divorced in 1890, where she moved to New York City. And this is where pretty much all records of Madeleine Smith end.
Okay.
There's some speculation that she remarried in New York City and died there under another name in 1928. And the other name I found, it was Leanie something. And I
Weird.
can't remember. I don't know why I've not written that down, actually. It was Leanie something. So Madeleine, Leanie,
Yeah,
you
Leanie.
could... But from what I could read, and one of the other sources that I listened to, it was a YouTube video, the dates wouldn't have matched up with her age. So she died, this Leanie gravestone says it would have been about 30 years out for ages and stuff like that. But then traveling to New York City in that kind of time, you could have just faked your age, your
Yeah.
name, your anything.
Yeah.
Because you just got on a boat. So Madeleine was set free, even though the jury believed she did it.
That is quite. It's a bit mental, actually, because like you think that guilty but not proven is like
Community service.
almost as like but it's like almost as good as just straight up you're guilty.
you need to be able to prove it, though,
yeah,
don't you?
I know, it's mad though, isn't it?
So that there's only other one court system in the world that has a replication of that, but it's not proven. There's Italian court has 5 outcomes,
Ooh.
and basically 2 of them are guilty and 3 of them are acquittal.
Yeah.
But ours is the only system that there are 3 verdicts and 2 of them favour you as the defendant.
Well, I like those odds, but like
I
for
don't like
myself-
those odds if you've done it.
yeah, but like not proven. Like you'd hope that it would carry some kind of something. Like community service at the least, or like you can't leave the country, you murdering bitch.
I mean, I don't know how you feel about this case. No, I read it because like the synopsis I read of the 4 cases, I read like I think it was the Glasgow Herald from the 60s or something. Mm-hmm. Basically had no, it wasn't. It was when the journalist I talked about last week who coined the phrase square mile murder.
Oh right, yeah.
They started talking about it. So there's a wee synopsis of each of the crimes. And I read it and I went, oh, she was acquitted for poisoning her fiance. And I was like, oh, well, she can't have done it then. She was acquitted. But then as I read it, I was like, oh no, she did.
Yeah, she did it.
But the thing about this one is, normally when I cover these cases or any case, you can see them becoming bad. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think she panicked.
Ooh, just like don't tell dad, panic.
Don't tell dad. I should marry into the right class.
Yeah, like
level.
this is a total.
Yeah.
I've made like a big mistake.
I don't. It was obviously malicious, but I'm not going to go out there and say she wasn't a murderous bitch. I think
Fair.
Although she, in my opinion, did murder him, I think it was a case of, I don't know how to deal with this, and I have this way of killing him.
Yeah, I suppose.
Which isn't okay. I'm not saying it's okay. I just think it's...
Yeah, it's like... And I see what you're saying.
And that's why I did the notes like that, rather than saying, she went and bought it and then she planned it and everything like that, because I don't think there was a lot of planning involved in it. I don't know. If anybody else has heard of the case before, because actually there wasn't a huge amount of reading that available for it, but if anybody else, that I found anyway, but if anybody else has heard about it or knows anything more, maybe you're from Glasgow and you know about it, please do give us a shout, because it's one that's actually intrigued me quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But there you go. I'm going to say actually that's the story of Pierre.
Nice. Yes.
I
think that was good.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I'll take good and I'll go and get a pint.
All right.
We'll see you in a bit.
Bye.
Hello, this is Steve from Evil Minds Podcast. On the podcast, I'll be covering some of the most horrendous crimes ever committed. Some of them you may have heard of, others you won't, but all of them are true. So come and join me every Wednesday as we look at some of the most evil minds that have existed. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or just about anywhere where you get your podcasts from. I hope to speak to you soon.
And that's us back. Drinks refreshed.
Indeed.
I've gone for a wee half.
I know, a little whiskey there.
Tuesday night, treat myself.
Somebody's got to.
Well, I need to sit and listen to you for the next however long, so...
Very rude.
You know I don't mean it. Or do I?
You ready?
I'm always ready, yeah. I'm excited. Are you going to do this to make me guess, since I might know? Or are you going to tell me straight away?
I don't know if I can do it to make you guess.
Okay.
I'll give you... Well, so it's kind of started around, like, in the 80s, really. 70s, 80s.
And we've said Glasgow already.
Glasgow.
Yep, okay. 70s, 80s.
It involves... It's a turf war.
The ice cream wars.
Yeah!
Yeah, okay.
Nice. Yeah. I hadn't really heard anything about them until I looked into it, to be honest. So...
Well, I'm excited now.
Bit of an eye-opener for me.
To be fair, I don't know a huge amount. I know of, and I know bits and pieces, so I don't think I'll be able to interrupt you too much.
Okay. Well, that makes a change.
Thanks.
So, the Ice Cream Wars was the name of a turf war that happened in the east end of Glasgow in Scotland in the 1980s between rival criminal organisations who were selling drugs and stolen goods from ice cream vans. So the van operators were involved in violent intimidation tactics, the most famous of which involved a driver and his family being killed in an arson attack that resulted in a 20-year-long court battle.
Wow, okay.
Do you know anything about that?
Well, I know the gist of the story, but I don't know anything about the court battle or anything, so...
Cool, well good, that's what my whole story's about.
Good.
So, the conflicts generated widespread public outrage and earned the Strathclyde police the nickname of Serious Chimes Squad, which was a play on the word Serious Crime Squad.
Yeah.
Squad, sorry. And people just ridiculed them really for their failure to address the violence that was happening.
Because it was Glasgow was pretty grim in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, I was like reading an article about it, and it was like titled Ice Cream Man, the most dangerous job you could have in Glasgow in the 1980s.
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of stuff happening in Glasgow. Like, Glasgow was a pretty grim place back in the day. I mean, lovely place now. I love it. Work in Glasgow, and I love the place. It's great for a night out. But some of the places now where you'd go to a pub, it's still a wee bit, still a wee bit on edge. But you wouldn't have gone into pubs back in the 80s.
Well, Glasgow was officially, I can't remember what year now, but it's like quite a running joke in Scotland, isn't it, that one year Glasgow was both the friendliest city in the world and the most dangerous in Britain.
Well, it was the murder capital of Europe for a while. Yeah.
So,
but they had that.
They'll stab you, but they'll do it with a friendly smile.
I don't know if you remember the slogan that was Glasgow's miles better. So Glasgow's miles better. Glasgow smiles better.
Yeah. Very good. So back in the 1980s in Glasgow, several ice cream vendors also sold drugs and stolen goods alongside their ice cream on their routes, and they used the ice cream sales as a front to do so. A turf war erupted between the vendors, and much of the violence that ensued was either due to intimidation or competition between them. During the conflict, rival vendors regularly raided each other's vans and fired shotguns into the windscreens of the vehicles to ruin them.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, mental. So the culmination of this violence came on the 16th of April, 1984, with the murder of 6 members of the Doyle family in the Rakazi housing estate. 18-year-old Andrew Doyle, who was nicknamed Fat Boy.
No, Big Fat Boy.
Big Fat Boy. Was a driver for the Marchetti firm, and had resisted being intimidated into distributing drugs on his run, and he'd also resisted attempts to take over his run. So he was just trying to make an honest living, as far as I could tell.
He was just trying to sell a 99 with a flake.
Yeah, some sprinkles perhaps.
Yeah, we can have a conversation about different ice creams later, but I've got one that I used to buy that was a Zoom.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, so see, everybody else says that to me, so I think I've got it wrong.
What was it?
It was like one of those, like a fruit pastels lolly with a different, like you eat the red bit off the top and it was yellow underneath. And
do you know what I always wonder though? Why do they do red and blackcurrant as the first flavours and like yellow as the middle? Because that's the shittest one.
With a crap green and yellows.
Yeah, nobody wants them.
Yeah, you're right. But would you eat it if it was that on the outside?
Oh yeah. Maybe you need to be lured in by the good flavour.
We've digressed.
Yes. This resistance from Fat Boy had already led him to being shot by an unidentified assailant through the windscreen of his van, which he survived. Incidents like this were known as frighteners, which were designed to do what they say in the tin, to like frighten people into...
I think being shot through the windscreen would frighten you.
Bit of a frightener, that one.
Absolutely.
So yeah, they used to just use scare tactics in order to either bully people into selling drugs for them, for these gangs and stuff, or just intimidate them into giving up their van and ice cream run and stuff so that they could do it instead. But Fat Boy prevailed and did not.
Good man.
I know. Quite brave. And as I said, he was only 18, so very brave.
Brave and or stupid, maybe.
Yeah. Due to his continued resistance, another frightener was planned against Fat Boy. And at 2 a.m. On the 16th of April, 1984, the door on the landing outside the top floor flat in Rakazi, where Fat Boy lived with his family, was doused with petrol and set alight. The members of the Doyle family and 3 additional guests who were staying in the flat that night were asleep at the time, and the resulting blaze killed 5 people, with the 6th dying later in hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really bad. So the victims were James Doyle, who was the father of the family, who was aged 53, his daughter Christina Halloran, who was aged 25, Christina's 18-month-old son, Mark, and the 3 of Mr. Doyle's sons, who were James, who was 23, Andrew, who was Fat Boy, 18, and Tony, who was aged 14.
Wow.
So,
I mean,
as you can imagine, it really like gripped the public.
Yeah, and for ones who are looking to try and stay clean, to lose that much of one family for doing the right thing is horrific.
Yeah, it's horrendous. Really bad.
Yeah.
So the ensuing public outrage in Glasgow at the deaths was considerable, and the Strathclyde police arrested several people over the following months and eventually charged 6 of them. So this was in 1984, which was the same year as the arson attack. As I said, they tried 6 people and 4 of them were all 6 of them were convicted, but 2 of them in particular were specifically targeted for the murders. So
they were tied directly to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think like the 6 people were kind of involved in just the violence and the turf war.
So they were involved in the frighteners,
yeah,
and the ensuing build up to the arson.
Yeah. So, but 2 people who were in particularly named for the murders were Thomas Campbell, also known as TC, and Joe Steele. They were tried for the murders and convicted unanimously, even though that's not even required in Scotland for a conviction.
Indeed, we've covered Scots law quite well tonight, haven't we?
I know, look at us. So they were sentenced to life imprisonment and were to serve no fewer than 20 years according to the judge's recommendation. Campbell was also separately convicted, again with the jury returning a unanimous verdict for involvement in the earlier shotgun attack on Fat Boy.
Right, okay, so for the frightener.
Yeah, and he was sentenced to serve 10 years in prison for that as well. The Crown's case against Campbell and Steele rested on 3 pieces of evidence, the first of which was a testimony by a witness called William Love. So, when I originally researched this, I didn't find that much on him, and then I found 1 or 2 articles that said that he was also an ice cream vendor already jailed for other violence and stuff. Okay. But I'm not too sure how true that is, because one of the articles that I read that said that called him John Love, and he was called William Love, so... Okay. Not very reliable. Yeah.
So somebody of that family, though?
Maybe. So William Love, though, is who they use as a witness in the court case. And he stated that he'd overheard Campbell and Steele and others in a bar discussing how they would teach Fat Boy Doyle a lesson by setting fire to his house.
Oh, okay.
The second piece of evidence was that the police stated that Campbell had made a statement recorded by 4 different officers that he said, I only wanted the van shot up. The fire at Fat Boy's was only meant to be a frightener, which went too far.
Right, okay, so they'd gone out to put the shits up someday.
Yeah.
And ended up killing 6 people in a blaze.
Yeah.
Doesn't scream turf war, it screams multiple murder.
Yeah, doesn't it? It's not really a good frightener, is it?
No, not at all.
And the third piece of evidence was that the police also stated that they found a photocopied A to Z street map of Glasgow on which the Doyle house in Bank End Street was marked with an X, and this was found within Campbell's flat.
So then so it was a targeted attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to the Crown, Campbell was a man with a record of violence, and he'd already served several years in prison during the 70s, and he'd been back to prison for a year in the 80s. He'd entered the ice cream van business in 1983 once released from prison, and had been keen to protect his patch against the rival Marchetti family. Steele was Campbell's henchman, a sidekick he recruited to help with the dirty work and his planned campaign of violence against Marchetti drivers and vans. The defence rejected the Crown's evidence, though, and this was during a 27-day trial. And afterwards, Campbell continued to insist that he'd been fitted up by both Love and the police. Campbell described Love during the trial as a desperado who had been willing to be a witness, pointing the finger at anyone to avoid going to prison himself. He was granted bail in exchange for his testimony at this trial. Campbell denied that he'd made the statement regarding the frightener going too far, and he was sure that the police had planted the map in his house as well. He claimed that when he'd been arrested and taken to Baird Street Police Station, a senior police officer had told him, "This is where we do the fitting up. I'm going to nail you to the wall." He stated at the time of the fire he'd been at home with his wife, and Steele also gave an alibi for the time. So both of them are declaring their innocence.
Yeah, well, of course they would.
Yeah.
Sorry, they were ice cream drivers as well?
Yeah.
Did you say how many firms were involved in this?
So this one's just predominantly between Campbell
two families
and Marchetti. So Marchetti was the Doyle family, So they were all involved in the machete, like the Doyles were involved in the machete farm, and that was Fat Boy and his family who died.
Yeah.
And then there was Campbell, who recruited Steele and had other pals that did these frighteners on the machete.
It was specifically these two families that
involved in this.
Involved in this, but the actual turf wars itself was...
Oh, there was loads. I think there was quite a few different vendors and like firms and families that were involved in it.
Like I said, yeah, I mean, I know bits, I know of it. I don't know about it.
So because Glasgow is so huge, like there is so many firms.
Even just the east end of Glasgow up that kind of Merry Hill way is
massive.
Is massive, yeah.
So like all the different routes was like taken over by different drug gangs and stolen goods gangs and stuff, and then they would either own their own ice cream vans and do it themselves, or they would like
infiltrate into
people that were just ice cream men and like frighten them into being part of their firm and like pushing these goods for them.
Gives something sinister to that jingle that you hear at the end of the road now, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, in 1989, which was 5 years after the conviction and the arson, Campbell and Steele tried to have their conviction overturned, but it failed. In 1992, 3 years after this, Love states that he lied under oath.
Okay.
So, two journalists, Douglas Skelton and Lisa Brownlee, wrote a book called Frightener, which was about the conflicts and the trial. They interviewed Love for the book, who stated and later signed affidavits attesting to the fact that he'd lied under oath. Love said, "I did so because it suited my own selfish purposes. The explanation as to why I gave evidence is this. The police pressurized me to give evidence against Campbell, who they clearly believed was guilty of arranging to set fire to Doyle's house." So, like, that's out of the three pieces of evidence that sent down Steele and Campbell, that's the first one already, like, disproven. Like, Love is like, yeah, I lied. I didn't overhear them in a bar plotting to set this fire. I just said that because the police pressured me to. I got out on bail, and...
he was basically saying it was in his interests to say something to get him a better...
Yeah.
Like a plea bargain.
Which is exactly what Campbell said straight after, and was like, he'd point the finger at anybody to get himself off the hook.
Yeah, he was one of those people that would just go, what do you want me to say? Does it make my life better?
Yeah. Right. And this is 8 years after the fact he's finally admitted, yeah, it was a lie.
By which time...
They've been in prison that whole 8 years.
Yeah, I was going to say by which time people have served 8 years in jail for it.
Yeah. And that's back, that was back in the 80s, so prison was pretty rough. A year after this, Steele escapes from prison and stages a protest by supergluing himself to the railings outside of Buckingham Palace.
What? I mean, that's commitment.
It's quite a protest.
That's quite something, yeah.
And he also stages a rooftop protest at his mother's house whilst he's on leave from prison as well. So he like stages these big campaigns of protest whilst out and about, whilst Campbell is protesting from within Barlinnie prison.
Wonderful place.
I know. So he's been there for how long, and so he's protesting, and he does so by going on hunger strikes, refusing to cut his hair, and he makes a documentary, which I tried to look into, but I couldn't really find. I found a lot of documentaries about the ice cream wars and stuff, and about him and about this conviction and stuff. But I couldn't really find his documentary. I need to look a little bit more into that.
I was going to say, I wonder how easy that is to do, because he wouldn't have access to, especially in the, in the late 80s, he's not got a camera phone.
No.
So to make a documentary, you'd need a film crew.
Yeah. So I think people, like, by this point, people were following the fact. It's been 8 years and they're still, like, attesting to the fact that they're innocent.
There would have been a public interest story there. So I wonder if some media outlet went, there's a story here.
Involved.
Yeah.
I do need to look into that one a bit more. After a lengthy legal argument, the Secretary of State for Scotland referred the case to the appeal court and granted Campbell and Steele freedom pending its outcome. So they got out of prison at this point.
Right, okay.
The appeal failed, however, because the 3 appeal judges reached a split decision on whether the fresh evidence relating to Love's testimony would have significantly affected the outcome of the original trial. Right. So that's what an appeal looks at, really.
Is what would this evidence have affect? Would it have changed the outcome of the original trial?
So Lord Cullen and Lord Sutherland both decided that it would not have changed the outcome, of the original trial, but Lord McCluskey thought it would have. But because it's 2-1, Campbell and Steele were returned to prison.
Yeah, and they were in late 80s, early 90s, the biggest legal heads in the country by a long shot. Most of us will remember the Cullen Report was the one that changed the gun laws in the UK. Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, for them to be looking at it,
they were the appeal judges.
It was taken to the highest level then. Yeah.
So 2 of them decided, no, we don't think the fact that Love's testimony was not true. We don't think it would have changed anything because there was still the other evidence that was supplied to the courts. So in 1997, which is 4 years later after this, the Secretary of State for Scotland, who is Michael Forsyth, grants interim freedom to Campbell and Steele pending a second appeal. Again, so they managed to get another appeal put through at this point, and they're again granted freedom in the pending months.
So were they allowed out of jail during these
they were interim freedom is you're let out.
Wow.
Because it's almost like you kind of go back to
you're almost on that
innocent till proven guilty again, because you're like, oh, maybe you're not guilty, let them out.
Yeah, so you're on that American version of you're on bail. You've paid your bailiff amount, and you can be out, but we'll come and get you if it's not right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So a year later, Campbell and Steele return to prison when the 3 Court of Appeal judges reach another split decision.
And the split says they stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go back to prison. That was in the February of 98. In December of 98, the legal fight continues. A further petition was presented to the Scottish Secretary, who at the time was Donald Dewar, asking for the case to be referred back to the Court of Appeal. Donald Dewar refused to refer the case, though, because he didn't believe that there were sufficient grounds to do so. And the solicitors for Campbell and Steele then took the case to the then newly created Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, who did in fact take up the case.
Okay.
So a couple of years later, in July 2000, the new Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is a terrible mouthful, which I'll just refer to as the Commission from now on.
Fair enough, I'll give you that, yep.
They go to court to request all of the Crown documents that were in play during the original trial.
Yep.
So they first request and receive material from the Crown Office, and then went to court. They then go to court to obtain further Crown paperwork relating to the case, including government correspondence. Lord Clark ruled in favour of the Commission being granted access to this paperwork, stating that the Commission has a statutory obligation to carry out a full, independent and impartial investigation into alleged miscarriages of justice. So a year later, the Commission refers the case to the appeal court for the 3rd time. They decide that it should be referred back to them, and pending the outcome of the appeal, Lord Justice Clerk, Lord Gill, grants Campbell and Steele interim freedom for the 3rd time. They're let out of prison whilst their appeal is pending.
This is getting a bit...
It's a bit mental, isn't it? In out, in out.
Sorry to interject
here,
but
go.
we've covered quite a few different cases where people have appealed and different things has happened, but I've never heard of anything. And between you and I, we've listened to I would say upwards of 10, if not 3,500 different true crime podcasts. So we fairly listen to a lot, but I've never heard of that. You're out until you get back. I would have thought, maybe I'm completely wrong here, that they would have been kept until proof.
Yeah.
Whereas this seems to be the other way around. It's let out until unproven.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It is odd.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say there, and it was just a thought I had, is at that point, so Donald Dewar was the Secretary for Scotland at that time, but he became First Minister.
Yeah.
He became the First Minister of Scotland. I wonder if this crossed that boundary line where he stopped being Scottish Secretary and became First Minister. I wonder if... I don't think it would have an effect in the court system because the Scottish law system didn't change with the evolution. But do you know, I was just thinking out, like, I'm now just thinking out loud, whether that affects how they're dealt with how because it spanned such a period of time that we went through them being dealt with while we were a non-devolved parliament right through.
I suppose, yeah.
I don't know. Like I say, it's just me just thinking out loud now.
I don't know.
No, it was only because you mentioned John Leduc there, and I was like, hang on a minute, because when he was Secretary for State for Scotland, he would have had a say to say this can happen. But I wonder if the same say would have happened for First Minister, which would have happened in this time period. I know.
It's a lot to think about, and you know that my politics is shaky at best.
And I'm not looking for an answer. It's just I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point to make.
Because, like I say, the Scottish courts haven't changed with devolution. It would just be who was in power where. You know, that kind of spider web of who had say on what would have changed there. But like I say, my original point being, I didn't realise that people were gone, your appeal has some weight.
Yeah.
Away home.
With you.
And we'll give you a shout back if you need to go back to jail.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Because that sounds to me like the wrong way of doing it. If you're guilty.
Well, if you're guilty, then it's a bit.
But if you're innocent, it's the right way to do it.
Well, yeah. So.
But how do you make that call?
I suppose maybe they look at stuff like their behaviour whilst inside.
Yeah, possibly.
Like if they've not done any damage or harm or anything, like they're not a danger to society, so like they'll be fine. Like they're not going to go and set fire to somebody's flat again, are they?
Again.
Well, that was their original crime if they're guilty. So like.
No spoilers.
So. Yeah, but actually what's impressive... No, you're fine.
That was just a...
What's impressive is that was in the November of 2001 that it's put back to the appeal court again, and it was by December of the same year that they are granted their interim freedom. So it's very quick.
Yeah, so...
A month later, you're out and about.
That's a quick process.
Very quick. So March 2004, which is 3 years later... Campbell's and Steele's convictions are quashed by the Court of Criminal Appeal in Edinburgh. The appeal was heard by the appeal court, and it was succeeded. Lord Gill, Lord Maclean, and Lord McFadyen quashed the convictions as a result of hearing new evidence, and because of what they stated to be significant misdirection of the jury by the judge at the original trial. The new evidence, which was not contradicted by the Crown, was from Brian Clifford, who is a professor of cognitive psychology. And I found this so interesting.
I was going to say, you'd love that, yeah.
This is so interesting, like what it is that they used as evidence to get them off. I think this is phenomenal. So Brian Clifford, this professor, testifies that the recollection of Campbell's statement by the 4 police officers at the time of the original trial was too exact. So like we've already accepted the fact that Love's statement was shit. That's nonsense. Yeah, he's admitted it. He's signed affidavits and stuff. So that's done. So then we only have the 2 other pieces of evidence left, which is what kept hanging, like failing their other appeals.
Yep.
The second piece of evidence was the fact that 4 different police officers all said, Campbell said to me, it was meant to be a frightener, it went too far, he's admitted it.
Right, okay, yeah.
And the third piece was the map found in Campbell's flat.
Yeah.
So Professor Clifford, then gets rid of evidence number 2 because he thinks that the statement that was remembered by all, like the 4 different police officers, they remembered it too precisely.
Oh, so there was some collusion there.
Right. So Clifford had performed studies where he tested people in Scotland and England on their ability to recall things that they had just heard. His results were that people only recalled between 30 and 40% of the actual words that they heard, and that the highest score obtained by anyone trying to recall what Campbell was supposed to have said was 17 words out of 24, which is a lot. I didn't do the maths, but it's actually a lot higher than... Hold on.
It's about 70%.
Yeah, I want to actually just have it because it'd be quite good.
It's pretty much bang on 70%.
Nice maths. 70.8.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's the one thing I can do.
That's quite impressive. Yeah, so normally it's between 30 and 40%. These police officers are recalling 70% of the words that he used, supposedly. He found that people often remember the meaning behind a person's words far better than the words themselves, and stated that the results of like the police officers testing and stuff strongly suggests that it was not at all likely that the officers would be able to record Campbell's statement in such similar terms. So the fact that they all said, he said this, and that the 4 police officers' statements were too close to each other.
Well, I think that probably goes with, that goes along with, like, when we do the research for this, I don't know if it's the same for you, I'll read something, and I might write it down for my notes for the episode, or scripting, or however we're calling it. I'm never going to recite to you verbatim what somebody says. I'm gonna read it, write it my way, and then deliver it different from what it's written down as to you. So that
it would be like if you asked me to repeat like some of your story to me tonight, I would, but it wouldn't be the words you used. It would just be what you told me, but in the way that I want to say it.
You'd be able to tell us about Madeleine Smith, what happened, but you wouldn't be able to say, oh, Bob said this, this, and this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was his issue with it. The appeal judges concluded that any jury hearing Professor Clifford's evidence would have assessed the evidence of the arresting police officers in an entirely different light, and that the evidence is of such significance that the verdicts of the jury, having been returned in ignorance of it, must be regarded as miscarriages of justice, and therefore Campbell and Steele were freed entirely.
And what year was that?
This is 2004.
It's 2004, and they're still free.
That was 1984 that they were first convicted. That's 20 years.
So based on 20 years of appealing, they came to the conclusion that actually the
evidence used against them
was completely false.
Pretty much, yeah. Love's testimony was false, and the police officer's testimony was rubbish as well. So the only thing that really should have been used as court as stand-up evidence was this map that was supposedly found in Campbell's.
Meh.
Exactly. It doesn't prove anything.
I've got a map with a load of X's on it.
Exactly.
And it's mainly just your house.
Ooh. Well.
It's just got next victim written above it.
Better hope that you don't get overheard in a pub soon, Bob.
It's not like we record anything in a pub anytime.
So the original trial judge, Lord Kincraig, who had told Campbell and Steele in court at the original trial that he regarded them as vicious and dangerous men, was now in his 80s and had been retired for 18 years, and still spoke out against the ruling of the appeal court days afterwards, stating that he could not accept there was a conspiracy among the police. At the original trial, he had instructed the jury that to believe Campbell and Steele were innocent was to believe that not 1 or 2 or 4, but a large number of detectives had deliberately come here to perjure themselves, to build up a false case against an accused person.
It's just... I'm going to tell you at the end of your story, I'm going to let you finish, about something I've been listening to recently that has a lot of similarities to this that I've been listening to recently, and I've told you to listen to, but I know you haven't yet. But somebody else in our discussion group's been listening to it.
Nice.
And I'm absolutely hooked. And it's got a lot of same feels to this.
I definitely would enjoy that.
Yeah. Sorry, but Kenny, and I'll tell you about it at the end.
So after the convictions were quashed, which is my favourite word.
Quashed is a good word,
It's a great word. After the convictions were quashed, he criticised the appeal court for diminishing the function of the jury, as in his opinion, the function of the jury is to deter. Oh my God!
Wow, you're doing well.
Let's go again. After the convictions were quashed, he criticised the appeal court for diminishing the function of the jury, as the function of the jury is to decide whether evidence is believable or not a judge. Fuck you. Campbell called for a fresh investigation of the murder of the Doyle family, accusing a man called Tam McGraw, both of the original murders and of instigating a campaign over 20 years ago to ensure that Campbell remained in jail and was silenced, including repeated attempts on Campbell's life. But commentators considered it unlikely that a fresh investigation would be launched as a result of the convictions being quashed, and the fresh evidence that had been presented since the original trial. This was in part because the claims made by Campbell were against a man whom he is regarded as hating. In 2002, Campbell was stabbed, which was believed at the time to be part of a long-running tit-for-tat feud between Campbell and McGraw. The other reason it was unlikely the case would be looked at again was because 2 police officers who had been heavily involved in the original case had since died. So you'd never be able to get a statement or, like, put them on stand or anything like that. So
you wouldn't be
people
able
were
to
just
say
like,
to them, look,
did you lie?
yeah, you got too close to what everybody else said.
Yeah.
Gee's the truth.
Yeah. So that was never going to happen. And sure enough, it's not happened.
No,
They've not reinvestigated the Doyle's murder. So in 2004, when Campbell and Steele were released, Campbell's solicitor said that it was the end of 20 years of hunger strikes, prison breakouts, demonstrations, political pressure, solitary isolation, prison beatings, and legal fight after legal fight. Which it was.
Yeah.
And in 2007, Tam McGraw, who Campbell was accusing of actually being the perpetrator,
Yep.
he died.
So
We'll never know. And the latest on it was actually an article that was published on the 23rd of March of this year, 2019. In an interview, Joe Steele, who was the henchman to Campbell and was also convicted of the murders, who is now 56, said that he also thinks that late crime lord Tam McGraw, also known as the Licensee, which is a pretty cool gangster name.
yeah, that really cool.
Pretty cool. He also thinks that Tam McGraw ordered the fire on the Doyles, and he thinks that he was guilty of it too.
He made the call and it happened.
But to this date, Steele and Campbell are free men, and nobody's ever been convicted of the murders of the 6 Doyle family members. And that is my take on the Glasgow Ice Cream Wars.
Great, loved that.
Thank you.
And I really loved that. You did it really well. Couple of takeaways. Would you like them?
Yes, please.
Didn't know affidavit was a British thing.
Yeah, I didn't. I actually didn't think about
That's
that.
actually what I picked my phone up to look at while you were talking. Apparently that's
it's just a law thing, I think.
it's just a law thing. I just assumed, because you hear these things
In America all the time.
Absolutely. So I just assumed Americanism, which is my own fault. Shouldn't have thought that. The other thing, terrible thing for the family.
Yeah,
To have
dreadful.
never had.
It's just never been. And you know what? I think quite right on Campbell for after 20 years of prison being released and calling for a reinvestigation into their murders, because I suppose not only we can only speculate that maybe he was calling for that as a further wanting to prove his innocence, find the man who did do it, but also good. They should have reinvestigated it, because at the end of the day, 6 people died in a horrible way for not really doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Including an 18-month-old baby, and just nobody's ever been
horrible.
Nobody's ever been done for that,
No, but the sad thing is, people have been done for it,
But yeah,
but then they were proved innocent. But then the skeptic in me goes, they were involved in it in some means. They were part of this gang turf war
yeah,
that has been given a nice shiny name of the Ice Cream Wars. So they were involved, because actually if you weren't selling drugs from an ice cream van,
yeah,
none of this would have happened.
yeah. So you're still a criminal.
So you're not responsible for the murders.
No.
But you were a part of the scene as such. I say that when I was at high school, random story, I was at high school, our ice cream van used to come to the door every...
Yeah, we had one as well.
Yeah, and I used to buy a fag and a match. 25p.
That's so good.
25p for a fag and a match.
Actually, I've got our ice cream truck that used to come to our school. Actually, our headmaster ended up getting done for it, because he was charging the ice cream man rent to park on the car park, and he had no legal right to.
Well, I was parked around the corner so that he couldn't be seen by the high school, so he could sell us cigarettes and matches.
That's excellent.
And it is excellent until you light your match and you've only got one match.
And then your fat goes out.
Yeah. And you just stood there going, now I've just got a cigarette and then I need to spend another 25p, but actually I just want 2 ice poles and a sausage roll.
Nightmare.
Honestly, life's difficult sometimes. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
No, I really enjoyed that. So what I was talking about that I think you should listen to.
Yeah.
So as we have done always, we will always push as many independent podcasts as we possibly can.
Yes, we do try to.
We're a big fan of other people that are doing exactly the same thing as we are. And you should listen to people like Seeing Red and the True Crime Enthusiast
Yeah.
and Men's and oh my goodness, I've got such a long list.
I know, stop before
I offend somebody. But the one I did listen to, and it's at the BBC production, Shreds.
Yeah.
It's about the killing of
I did see your post about that.
Yeah, it's about the killing of a prostitute in Wales in the 80s. And there's a lot of police. We'll go with police issues with it so that I don't spoil it for anybody.
Well, we know how much we enjoy. I do enjoy stuff like that because the first ever proper serious true crime podcast I ever got into was, of course, Serial's take on the Adnan Syed case, which we've discussed before.
Oh, what's that?
And we're not going to get into. But, like, a lot of that is to do with police and
Yes,
what
and you and I are just
couldn't have.
gonna have an hour-long debate about our opinions on it because we both know they differ.
Yeah, I know. But, yeah, like, stuff like that I do find incredibly interesting. And, like, unfortunately, as much as I wish it wasn't true, there is instances of police corruption and collaboration and stuff. And, like, you just, I suppose until it's proven, you can't really say that it is or isn't true. But it does seem that in this case that, you know, with the backing of this professor, like, he's saying, like, it'd be very, very unlikely that or I think it was more than that. I think it was, like, 6, actually. Sorry. Like a lot. 6 policemen, I think.
It's impossible for them to be that
accurately remembered the same statement. Yeah, it's very odd. Like, if they all said, oh yeah, he said something to the effect of, it wasn't meant to go that far as a frightener, but they said the same sentence in the same order, pretty much, verbatim.
Well,
it's unusual.
I know how long your journey to work is in the morning and back. And
I will listen.
I reckon you could catch up with Shreds before we record the next episode.
All right.
And I will have a very brief chat about it. We'll maybe do a longer one. Well, we will do a longer one off microphone, but we'll maybe do a longer one on our Patreon episodes.
Ooh, very nice.
Which brings us beautifully on to...
Before that, just very, very quick.
Please do.
Sorry. I don't think I ever did do my catch-up as promised. So a couple of months back...
Yep, so you're going to do your Dr. Evil bit. Yes, please do.
So a couple of months back, I covered the story of Dr. Evil, who was actually a man called Brendan McCarthy, who was a body modification artist from Wolverhampton.
Yep.
Who was in the courts accused of GBH and... wounding with intent on 3 cases for each of those.
So this was another one that you and I slightly differed on our opinions of.
Mm-hmm. So very, very quick synopsis of that in case you didn't catch it. You should listen, though. It was a great episode, in my opinion.
It was really good. Probably 3 or 4 episodes ago.
I think it was in March.
It was one of our episodes has Dr. Evil in the title.
Dr. Evil. So he's a body modification artist. He removed a nipple, he removed an ear, and he split a woman's tongue, and it was all consensual. None of those people had a complaint against him, but it turns out actually since it's come out, it's a rival business owner who made the complaint against him. He was taken to court for 3 counts of GBH and wounding with intent for these 3.
And from memory, he was taken to court in the week that we did the episode.
Yes, he was. So I covered the story. And later that week, after recording, he went to court. He changed his plea from innocent to guilty in order to receive a lighter sentence because he knew he was going to be sentenced. And he was sentenced to 40 months in jail, but it's quite widely believed that he's probably only going to serve half of that. But still, I think it's a terrible shame to be sentenced to 40 months in prison. But that's a debate for another day.
I agree with you. I think the prison sentence is above and beyond, shall we say. You and I differed on the day when we discussed this. I think our opinions still differ on this, but it's difference. It's difference in lifestyles, darling, shall we say.
Definitely.
However, I would say I don't think he did anything wrong.
I don't think so either.
And I'll finish that, but my opinions I made clear in the episode.
Yes. Go back and listen if you wish to hear them.
Please do. If you have enjoyed what you listen to, you can always find us on our social media pages. We are trying to be as active as we possibly can.
Getting a little bit better?
We're getting there. It's nearly a year now, but we're getting there. You can find us on Facebook.
Twisted Britain.
You can find us on Twitter.
Twisted Britain.
And you can find us on Instagram.
Twisted Britain.
You can also find us in our wee discussion group on Facebook, and you will find us by...
Twisted Britain Discussion Group.
Search that and you'll find us. Everybody that wants to be a member is welcome to be a member.
Oh, yeah, we accept anybody.
Yeah, we're no picky. If you do like what you listen to, with us, we release 2 episodes a month, but we also put up an extra episode every month, around about the 15th. No, in fact, not around about. On the 15th, on our Patreon. If you would like to subscribe to our Patreon to get an extra episode, we would love you to be part of our little group of Patreons.
I already know what I'm doing for my next one. I'm quite excited. It's very different for me.
Oh, I've got a wee idea for my next one as well.
Lovely.
Mine's a bit different as well. Maybe we'll just have a weird Twisted Britain. That's all right.
Nice.
If you'd like to join our Patreon to get one of those extra episodes, you will have to join to one of the tiers that I can't remember at the moment. We have different tiers on there, whether you like to give us a little something and receive a shout out, or give us a little something, receive a badge, or give us a little something else and get our episodes.
And other perks.
And other perks. We have merch available with a discount and everything. But rather than being awkward and pushing that, we will call it to a close this evening and say thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
And we will see you again next time.
Thank you, love you, bye.
Thank you, love you, bye.